Sophia Iannicelli, and I was incredibly honored to have David give me a call and say, so, would you be interested in talking about this? And after I kind of ran around my living room and flapped my hands a little bit, I replied via email, why, yes, that would be lovely. And he sent me some guidelines of what to talk about, and he said, the topic is sex. You can talk about anything you want and make it personal. And I went, okay. So I'm going to do my little disclaimer dance that there will be sexual images depicting things that are not always happy. Right now it's really popular in the sex-positive community to talk about trigger warnings. You may be triggered if you see some of these images. There is images of sex and sexuality, and we even touch on domestic violence a little bit. So I will not be offended if you get up and walk out and take a break from. Feel free to come back. Feel free to not. You can always go like this. I promise it's all really good art. I think it's really good art. And with no further ado, one of the important things about a lot of what I'm going to tell you really ties into how our society views sex and how difficult it is to be a fully, authentic person in all of your parts when there's a big part of what makes us who we are that the rest of society is like, you can only talk about that in your bedroom. You can only do that over there. Or, you can only do it this way, and that's the only way. I was raised by my father, and I was raised by a mother who was raised by her father. So I have a slightly different perspective than I think a lot of Americans do. I was also the first person on both sides of my family to be born in the U.S. So I also have a slightly un-American view about some kinds of things. So every now and then I just don't quite understand a lot of the way our society talks about sex and deals with it. It's interesting to me that in preparing for this talk, one of the things that the Seattle Erotic Art Festival focuses on is the idea that erotic art isn't just about, bits and pieces. It's not just about genitals. It's not just about the sex act. Erotic energy is kind of like a life force. It's that thing that kind of drives us to do most things in our lives, whether it's procreate, whether it's make a piece of art, whether it's to go eat the food. It's when they talk about, ground into the earth and pull that energy up, where's the first place it goes? Your crotch. And then it goes up from there. So it's really kind of like this base energy that we can work from. I chose this picture here because somebody once said, I love your sneaky toes. And I thought that was such an odd thing to focus on, as they weren't going, hey baby, you have sexy feet. They liked that little peek of something. And I realized that's what makes something erotic. It's something that catches your attention. Has anybody ever heard the saying, good art makes you want to go make art? That's kind of the way I feel about erotic art, is that if erotic art makes you go, that's hot, or, oh, people are into that? Oh, I kind of get that. That's good art. It made you have a feeling. It made you want to do something about it. The Seattle Erotic Art Festival is interesting in that I've watched it. So it's been around for 12 years, and I've been involved in some form or another the whole way. The very first year they sent out their call for art, I was married at the time, and my husband had just been starting to get into photography. I've done a lot of modeling, and so he brought in I brought him in with me to a photo shoot, and he's like, that's cool. I want to take naked pictures of chicks too. Like, okay, I'll help you. Built-in model. We live together. So from the beginning, he got accepted into the show, and I went to this place, and it was amazing how it was very much all about the bits going in bits and the really graphic close-ups. And over the years, the people who have been submitting to the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, they've upped their game. They're doing stuff like this and saying, yes, this is erotic. And people are like, where are the bits and parts going inside of each other? It's like, well, there's always going to be a couple. We don't want to disappoint people, but really. But one of the biggest things that I'm really focused on is the idea of erotic energy as this life force. And in that life force, we have Eros and Thanatos. Eros being, all about life-giving, really affirming, love, sex, very fecund. Whereas Thanatos is the death energy, the closing down, the destruction. And these are in equal measures in our life. We tend to not look at Thanatos, but every time you make a drawing or you start a project and you go, that won't do. You crumple up the paper, you take the document to the trash in your computer. All of that, that's Thanatos. You're respecting that you have to destroy things in order to start new. Whenever we finish an art project, we're closing something down and we're putting it to bed. And we're saying goodbye to it. And it's a small death every time we finish a project. I first came into these concepts from Susie Bright in a book that she wrote in 2000 called Full Exposure. And she talked about how we take this erotic energy and we move it through our bodies into our hands, into our voices, and we make art and we do scientific explorations that are driven by this wanting to understand this life force energy. In 2003, I got involved in a small project called the Little Red Studio, and the artist Jeff Hanks talked a lot about Eros and Thanatos and really put it into his work. He also was a really big fan of using erotic energy to get things going for his art projects and his different works that he did. And as I got involved with him, I got involved with that. And that was, and while it was like, this is kind of weird, we're doing this like little ritual thing, and then we're going to have sex, and then we're going to paint, and it was amazing art that we made. It was really, really amazing. And what his idea was is that you're not supposed to do that every time. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get juiced up by something, and you're supposed to go, yeah, and then that you pull that energy up and you put it in your hands when you start to paint, when you start to write. And that's something that we just don't talk about. It's like, why don't we talk about that? We see the sexy picture and we say, hey, let's go have sex. This is good. This is sexy. And that's one of the interesting things about what is porn and what is erotica is something that everybody talks about. Every year at the art festival, they always write somebody, and I'm just saying they as, the big collective out there in the world. There's always someone that writes an article about, well, is it erotic or is it just porn? Depends. What'd you use it for? Did you go home and masturbate and think about it? Guess what? It was porn. Whether it was the JCPenney's, lingerie catalog, or whether it was National Geographic, or whether it was this really beautiful painting. There's this one particular painting that I didn't put up here because I don't own the rights to it or have access to it. But it's a impressionist painting, and it's a woman on a swing. And she's, got her feet kicked out, and she's got the big flowing dress, and she's got her suitor pushing her on the swing. And that to me is what just always just kind of put a little flutter in various parts of my body. There's just something very sweet about it. So I actually did a performance where I actually tied a gentleman up in the swing and sat on him and swung. And it was pretty amazing. And all of that came from me going, ooh, that's cute. Took that energy, moved it up. That artist was dead, so I couldn't go after them. Now, I've admitted having sex with an artist that I was posed for as a model. And now I'm going to talk about how there are some relationships that never consummating that sexual relationship makes for some amazing art. This gentleman is a dancer here in Seattle, and we have had a most wonderful, wonderful collaboration. We do a type of performance called contact dance improv, which is really a lot of fun, lots of body contact. There's rolling around on the floor. It's very primal and very freeing, because it's very much based on, what am I feeling right now? Oh, this feels good to my body, so I'm going to move this way. Oh, no, how about like this? Yes, there we go. And so it's really exciting to be able to have this really juicy, sexy, amazing energy with somebody and not be obligated to do anything else other than make art. And if it wasn't for the idea that erotic energy can be a creative force, that relationship would never be possible. And we live in a society right now where so often people look at, you turned me on, so that means that we should date and we should do this and we get to get a mortgage and make babies. And I just want to dance and make some art with you. You're cool and all. And we had to have that talk. And our relationship survived it, where he was like, so we should move this direction. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to lose what we got. Because eventually something will happen, and, nothing lasts forever in any relationship. Somebody has to die, let's face it. Even, the true love forever, that's where Thanatos comes in. There's always a death there. So we had this really big conversation about that, about, hey, this is where it is. This is where the juicy stuff is. And when we start adding other things in, we won't get the great art that we've had. Not all the artists that I've worked with have been partners in any manner. This photograph is a harder one. This photograph came out of, horsing around with a friend. When you have a head go up and a head go down, they can't occupy the same space. Oops. So I got a black eye for a stupid reason. I don't even have a good story. I'm sorry. And so, that's where the art started, because it was like, oh, we could do something cool with this. And so I talked to my partner at the time, and I'm like, okay, so I want to do something with this black eye. I mean, come on, don't you want to take this photo? And he was like, I don't know, man, this is intense, blah, what are people going to think? And I'm like, look, I could never do makeup like this. We got to take advantage of this. And this was our delving into that Thanatos of, yes, there's not sex in this. But that's also a part of what sex is. There's some scary stuff in sex. There's bad stuff that happens. And it's a part of life. And it's shitty. And it's real. And so we tapped into that. What does it look like for someone who's in an abusive relationship? And that's where we went with that kissing the fist. It was like, okay, this is some good imagery. Why would anybody do that? Because there's a million reasons, all mixed up with that Eros and Thanatos. Yes, it's bad. Yes, it's good. Now it's bad. Now it's good. Oh, it hasn't been bad for a long time. I picked this one because I thought it was a nice bring you back up from the... This is by Lisa Lazo de Valdez. She's out of Portland, and she does stock photography, mostly what she considers fashion photography. And every year I ask her to come back to the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, and she's like, but I'm not an erotic artist. She does the most sexiest stuff I've ever seen, and most of her people aren't naked. One of the things that art gives me a chance to do is connect with people. In taking a look at sex, I I almost went the clinical direction with this talk. You can say, what sex are you? And you're just purely talking about the biological function of your body, irregardless of what your gender is and how you view yourself. And we're so divorced from that as well. And how do we tap into that creatively? A really dear friend of mine had this idea for a performance that we never actually did. And what we were going to do is we were going to set up something similar to this, where we timed all of our movements so that we were putting on makeup as if we were mirroring each other. We never got a chance to do that, mostly because we were going, oh, this is going to be hard. And sometimes art is too hard. And so that's where photography comes in, because everybody can be fabulous for 1/60th of a second. And so playing with our sexualities and looking into this, what do you see in this picture? There are so many things that you could see. Is this what she's going to see when she gets older? Is this what he sees when he looks in the mirror and puts on his makeup? Sex is also about fun. This was, I was called in to what's called to be the guest rigger. So I was the person who tied up the model. And they asked me for something dynamic and something interesting. And she was doing all these lovely poses. The whole time she's getting tied up. And I'm like, no, he asked for dynamic. Dynamic means moving and fun, not slow and graceful. So I climbed on top of her. The photographer happened to catch this moment where where I was looking down on her and she looked up at me like, are you fucking serious? And I was like, yep. We forget that. We forget that it's fun. And so to bring this all back around, the Seattle Erotic Art Festival is something that is now my baby. It's become what I pour my creative energy into. And the reason that I do spend so much time on this is that I hear from photographers, from painters, from drawers, from illustrators, and now this very exciting, one of the things that I'm most excited about is I've been watching the development of the digital art genre as it's getting more sophisticated. And it's so exciting to watch some of my, illustrator artists start to submit works of art that are purely done digitally, which is super exciting. And it's interesting because people are like, oh, it's not very well done. And it's like, the medium is new. Give it a chance. Look what they've done already. And in just the last 3 years, I've seen an amazing growth in sophistication of digital art, where people are actually drawing in the computer. And this to me is just like the next extension. This is like, we're eroticizing our machines. We are making them a part of us. Not eroticizing our machines, but actually pouring our creative energy into them to make them alive and make them real. And just so that eventually, when you see somebody with an electronic pad and a stylus, you'll go, oh, you're an artist. Just like we used to do when we'd see someone with their easel, doing the open air drawing or painting. It will have the same, that's my goal, to have the same cachet that all forms of art, people look at and go, oh, you're an artist. Let's make some art. Mm-hmm. The other reason I am involved in the Seattle Erotic Art Festival is because it's a way to get people to talk about sex in a really safe way. Did I skip a whole slide? I'm sorry. I did, didn't I? I'm going to jump. Sorry. This woman, this was her first time doing anything like the festival. She'd never gone to see an erotic art festival. She'd never gone to a burlesque show. Got a chance to talk to her just a little bit. And this was one of our performers. And he was walking around just in his little suit, and he was offering himself as a bench for people to sit on and look at the art, because we didn't have very many seats, so we had to get creative. Because that's one thing that art patrons always complain about. Where can I sit down? And she had a lovely time. And this being in that atmosphere where it was like, yes, you're in a sexually charged atmosphere, and it's safe. Because when you look at a piece of art, you can go, oh, that's really interesting. And it says nothing about what you do in your bedroom. But everybody's scared that it will. And so what I want to do is I want to provide a place for people to explore sexuality in a safe place where they can do it as an intellectual exercise, and they can do it as a safe emotional exercise. Doesn't mean anything if you go up to a piece of art and go, how did they do that? Or if you go, oh, boy, people are into feet. That's weird, but oh, I get it now. If I could have my wish, I would change the world so that there wasn't any problem for all of the creative mornings around the nation to get sponsors for a talk about sex. If I could change the world, everybody would be able to say, oh yeah, I had an amazing weekend. My lover and I, we went to the cabin and, all we did was have picnics and have sex and we made art. If I could change the world, the tweet that I saw earlier this week that said, my favorite sexual position is where you're painting and I'm writing my book and we're in the same room and occasionally we look up at each other and smile. And nobody would think that was weird. That they would go, wow, you had a sexy day. So I would like to encourage everyone here to think about the next time you're working on something creative is how can you make it juicy for you? How can you pull up something from your sexual life or from your emotional love life? And how can you use that to feed your creative endeavors? And I'm not suggesting that you have to make art that's sexually explicit. I would love it if you made art that was so subtly erotic that people looked at it and they went, oh, that's pretty amazing. Because that's where it'll start. That when people go, oh yeah, it's sexy, but it's not over the top. And when we start getting America used to that, then we can go, yeah, that's pretty blatantly sexy. They did a really good job, and they, and rather talking about the bits and parts, they're talking about how it makes them feel. Michael Rosen is a photographer who has been doing what he calls fine sex art. He does not do erotic art. And he is deliberate about how he poses his models. He's very into symmetry. They're so incredibly flowing. And he is meticulous. Yes, okay, the two girls that are, doing sexual things to each other, they're posed just exactly so they're like a yin-yang. It's just perfect. Okay, turn your head this way. In some ways, it's almost clinical the way he works. But it is so definitely sexual. And it was fascinating. I modeled for him once, and he's a charming little old man. He's, I think he's almost 80 now. But in a lot of ways, he's incredibly clinical. And it's amazing how he can take something that's so graphically sexual and go, this is art. This is really important that we get it just right. Just as if somebody was doing a painting and they wanted to make sure that all the proportions were right. He's also that's actually part of the reason why he's one of our masters of erotic art. We're trying to pick people and slowly seed the festivals over the years with people who have gone out and really put an impact on the art world, put an impact on sex-positive world, and help create this space where we can use erotic energy as a creative force. So thank you so much for having me here. And I look forward to your juiciness.